The silence of Willowmore. There are places in England where the fog doesn't just hide things. It devours them. It began with the fog, thick and suffocating. It spilled down from the moors like something alive, curling through the crooked lanes of Willowmore, swallowing lampposts, creeping beneath doorways. At 5:43 p.m. on the 3rd of November, 1984, the sun gave up trying to fight it. By 6 p.m., the entire village had gone still. Not silent. Still. Even the crows had vanished. From her bedroom window, Maisie watched it roll across the graveyard, thick as wool, silencing even the wind. She was only 9, but she knew something was wrong. Not a storm's coming wrong. Not Mum's in a mood wrong, something older, heavier. Something bad. Across the village, inside a crumbling cottage with ivy growing through the stone, Eleanor was lacing her boots. 17 years old, clever, observant and quiet, the kind of girl people trusted without knowing why. She tightened the laces with a sharp tug, glancing once at the letter on the table. Miss Eleanor Wren, your presence is requested at Ashgrave Estate at 6:30 sharp. Lord B. Crawley. A wax seal pressed in blood red. She hadn't told her mother. Not yet. She knew she wouldn't approve. Maisie entered the room without knocking, holding her ragged teddy by one ear. You're not going out, are you? Eleanor smiled but didn't answer. She reached for her coat. Wool, green, slightly too big, and wrapped it tight around her thin frame. Maisie's voice trembled. Mum says that house is cursed. Eleanor paused. You listen to too many stories, she said softly, brushing a blonde strand from her sister's cheek. But you heard them too, Maisie whispered. The screams. The voices? When we walked past last winter? Eleanor looked down. Yes, she had heard them. Not screams exactly, more like echoes. Voices that didn't quite carry through the air, but curled into your bones. She hadn't told anyone. A knock on the door startled them both. 3 sharp raps, perfectly timed. Not the postman, not a neighbor. When Eleanor opened it, no one stood there. Just the fog, and a black envelope lying on the step. Another letter. She picked it up. It was blank inside, except for one line written in smeared ink. Don't come late. He doesn't like to wait. She left just before dusk, walking the narrow lane that cut through the woods. Trees hung low like bent-backed watchers. The deeper she walked, the stranger the sounds became. Creaks, whispers, distant knocks. No birds, no wind. Just the crunch of her boots and the pounding of her heart. Ashgrave Estate appeared slowly through the fog. Black iron gates twisted with thorns, towering stone walls and windows like blind eyes. As she approached, the gate swung open by itself. Not slowly, violently, like it wanted her inside. She stepped through. The moment she crossed the threshold, the air changed. Heavier, colder, and the gate slammed shut behind her. She didn't flinch, but something in the shadows did. Inside the manor, the candles were already lit. A long hallway stretched before her, lined with portraits of people who looked wrong, smiling just a little too wide. Eyes that followed you no matter where you stood. And there, at the far end, a figure. Tall, lean, dressed in midnight blue, pale hands clasped behind his back. A face made of angles, with eyes like thawing ice. Lord Bennet Crawley. He spoke without moving his mouth. Welcome, Miss Wren. His voice was inside her head. The house was not haunted, it was the haunting. The manor's doors didn't creak open. They yawned, wide and slow, as if the house had waited centuries to breathe again. Eleanor stepped inside and the scent hit her first. It wasn't rot. It wasn't dust. It was something older. Like pressed flowers buried in coffins. Like forgotten perfume clinging to bone. The corridor ahead was lined with candle sconces, their flames motionless, as if the air itself dared not move. The butler appeared from nowhere. Miss Wren? His voice was brittle, like old paper. His eyes clouded with cataracts. But unblinking. His name was Mr. Finch, and he looked as though he hadn't left the manor in decades. He didn't ask her to follow. He simply turned, and she obeyed. They passed dozens of doors, some locked, some slightly open, revealing glimpses of strange rooms, a red hallway filled with mirrors, a nursery covered in chains. One room had only a single chair, placed exactly in the center, facing the wall, and then a cold breath on her neck. She turned. Nothing. But the candles behind her had all gone out. Mr. Finch didn't notice, or pretended not to. Finally, they reached the library. Double oak doors carved with scenes of wolves devouring birds. Eleanor stepped inside, and her breath caught in her throat. The room was cathedral-like, bookshelves rising 3 stories high. A dome above her head was painted black, scattered with stars. No constellations she recognized. In the center stood a long table with old parchment, maps, journals, and a portrait. She froze. The girl in the painting was no more than 13, pale skin, auburn hair, sad haunting eyes. Underneath, Agatha Crawley, 1874, presumed lost. Eleanor took a shaky step forward. The girl looked like Maisie. Not similar, not resembling. Exactly. Suddenly, in a whisper, she turned. No one. Then a presence behind her. Lord Crawley had arrived. "Miss Wren," he said, voice smooth as polished ice. He moved like a shadow, fast, soundless, always slightly ahead of where you expected him to be. He offered no handshake. "I'm pleased you accepted my invitation," he continued, eyes scanning her like a puzzle to be solved. "You're quiet, observant, thoughtful. I like that in a girl." Eleanor felt her chest tighten. She didn't respond. He gestured to the books. "These are records, family documents. They must be preserved, organized, but more importantly, understood." She approached the table slowly. The books were bound in cracked leather. But they weren't just genealogies. Some had symbols she'd seen only in forbidden folklore books. Circles within circles, runes, languages that slithered off the page. One opened on its own. Inside, drawings of screaming girls, diagrams of bone cages, rituals under blood moons. Lord Crawley watched her. "These are our ancestors' truths, Miss Wren. Buried by time, whispered by blood." Eleanor tried to speak, but her voice failed. And then she noticed it. A journal, with a fresh page. The ink was still wet. Eleanor Wren arrived 6:42 p.m. Status pending. She looked up. Crawley's face had changed. He was smiling now, but the smile didn't reach his eyes. She spent hours working under his gaze. He paced the room in slow circles. Occasionally, he'd mutter something to the air, as if speaking to invisible guests. Once she heard him say, "The house remembers, even when they forget." At 11 p.m. he stood suddenly. "You'll stay the night," he said, as though it were not a request. "It's too foggy to walk back. Finch will prepare your room." Eleanor's hands trembled. "But my sister—" He waved a hand. "She'll be fine." Finch appeared again as if summoned. No goodbye, no smile. Lord Crawley simply vanished into the shadows between the shelves. Mr. Finch led her to the east wing. The air grew colder with every step. Finally, they reached a heavy door. Her room. It was clean, old. The window was nailed shut. The mirror was covered with a black cloth. On the nightstand, a glass of water. And a note. "Do not leave your room after midnight. Do not speak to the girl in the mirror. Do not answer if she knocks." Her hands shook. She turned to Finch. He was already gone. The door clicked shut behind her, locked from the outside. The clock struck 12. Somewhere deep in the manor, a door opened, and a girl began to sing, a lullaby, soft, broken. "Hush now, sister. Don't make a sound. The house is listening, underground." Eleanor pressed her hands to her ears, but she heard every word. Some houses breathe, others watch, Ashgrave remembers. The ticking woke her. Not the rhythmic ticking of a clock. This was wet, irregular, living. Like something crawling inside the walls, clawing at the plaster with bleeding nails. Eleanor sat bolt upright in bed, her chest heaving. Her breath created little clouds in the frigid air. The fire had long since died, and then she heard it again. Scrape, scratch, tap, tap, tap. It was coming from inside the wall behind the headboard. She held her breath, heart pounding against her ribs. Then a whisper. Faint, fragile, and terrifyingly young. "Are you awake?" She scrambled backward, nearly falling off the bed. The voice was inside the room, but the door remained locked, and the mirror still draped in black. She waited. Silence returned. Until... tap, tap, tap. This time from the mirror, the black cloth began to move, lifting slightly at the corners, as if unseen fingers were trying to peel it away. "No," she whispered. "No, no, no." She lunged forward and pressed the cloth back down. But the tapping didn't stop. It grew louder, desperate. She grabbed the candle and held it toward the glass, her hand trembling. Just beneath the fabric, a faint shape began to emerge. A face, pale, hollow-eyed, smiling. Suddenly, bang! 3 thunderous knocks at the door. She screamed. "Miss Wren," came Finch's voice, muffled and distant. "Breakfast is served. You are expected in the dining hall." The knock had not come from him. It had come from inside the room. She opened the door cautiously. Finch stood in the hallway, perfectly still. Too still. Did you hear it last night?" she asked, voice cracking. "The girl in the mirror?" His expression did not change. "There is no mirror," he said coldly, "only reflections." She felt a chill travel down her spine. The dining hall was massive, lined with broken chandeliers and cobweb-draped portraits. Only 2 places were set at the long oak table. Lord Crawley sat at the far end, sipping dark tea from a bone-white cup. He gestured for her to sit. "You look disturbed," he said, his tone amused. "I heard someone," she said. "A girl, in my room." He tilted his head slightly. "How curious. The East Wing hasn't been used in years. You must have been dreaming." She stood her ground. It wasn't a dream. His eyes glimmered with cold satisfaction. "Then perhaps the house is getting familiar with you." He pushed a faded newspaper toward her. "Willowmore girl missing, 1981. 13-year-old Anna Hayworth vanished without a trace. Last seen near Ashgrave grounds. Locals suspect foul play. Search ended after 2 weeks. Body never found." "She was the last guest," Crawley said flatly. "A scholar. Clever like you." Eleanor's blood turned to ice. "And before her?" she asked. He smiled, showing too many teeth. "Others." Later that day, she wandered the hallways, determined to find answers. Each corridor seemed to shift behind her. Doors changed positions. Staircases vanished. The house moved when she wasn't looking. In a hidden alcove, she discovered an old phonograph. A record already sat on the turntable, its label scratched. She cranked the handle and dropped the needle. A child's voice crackled through the static. "The silence is not empty. It's where they hide." Then, shrieking, ear-piercing, inhuman shrieking. The record burst into flames. As she ran down the hall, smoke in her wake, a door opened on its own. It led to a forgotten study, filled with torn books, jars of black liquid, and pages of rituals etched into human skin. In the center, a crib. She stepped closer. Inside lay a doll. Porcelain, cracked, eyes wide open. When she reached out, its mouth opened on its own, and it whispered, "He's feeding the house again." Eleanor screamed and stumbled back. The walls began to bleed, not metaphorically. Thick red liquid seeped between the wooden panels, trailing symbols that pulsed like veins. The house was alive, and it was waking up. She fled back to her room and locked the door. On the bed, another note had appeared. Day 1, accepted. Day 2, recognized. Day 3, devoured. She turned it over, a single line. "Do not eat the meat." Her stomach dropped. What had she just eaten for breakfast? Outside her door, footsteps. But not just one pair, many, small, light, barefoot. And then came the chorus of voices, girls, whispering, chanting, humming lullabies that bent language. And in the middle of it all, Maisie's voice. Faint, afraid. "Ellie, please, come home." Memory fades, but the house remembers everything. She couldn't sleep. Not after the voices. Not after Maisie's whisper. Not after the note. Eleanor sat cross-legged on the icy floor, the lamp's flame flickering violently, as if reacting to something unseen. She clutched the note in her hand. "Do not eat the meat." A piece of yesterday's breakfast still sat in her stomach, the bitter aftertaste clinging to her tongue. Her thoughts twisted into horrible possibilities. What kind of meat had it been? There were no animals on the property, no birds, no deer. Nothing ever moved beyond the iron gates of Ashgrave, and no one had ever seen the kitchen. She decided to explore. The east hallway was darker than before, candles now completely extinguished. Their wicks snapped clean off. She carried the lamp in one hand and a small rusted letter opener in the other. It was foolish. She knew it wouldn't protect her, but it made her feel less helpless. That's when she saw it. a red thread trailing across the wooden floor. It was thin, almost like a spider's silk, leading away from her room and toward the old servant's stairwell. The same one that had been bolted shut 2 days ago. Now it stood wide open. Something had unsealed it. She followed. The steps creaked beneath her feet as she descended. The walls here were made of stone, old, damp, pulsing slightly with moisture. It felt like she was walking down the throat of something ancient. She reached a small wooden door at the bottom, cracked open just enough to breathe a smell into the air. Not decay, but something worse. Preservation, formaldehyde, chemicals, iron. She pushed it open and froze. The room was dimly lit with green lamps. Shelves lined the walls, not with books, but with jars, hundreds of them, each one containing a single object: a tooth, a clump of red hair, a small doll's hand, a shriveled eye. Eleanor gagged and turned away, and that's when she saw the drawings on the wall. They were murals, painted in a child's hand, in dried blood. Girls, always girls, in cages, buried beneath floorboards, screaming behind mirrors, and in the center, a man's figure with no face wearing a crown of thorns. Beneath it was scrawled, "The Feeder of Ashgrave." She backed away, her breath catching. A cold hand gripped her shoulder. She screamed. It was Mr. Finch. He didn't speak. He simply stared at her, then pointed to the far wall. A door she hadn't seen before, made of iron, etched with dozens of names. Each one scratched out, except for one, at the very bottom. Eleanor Wren. "No," she whispered. Finch leaned closer and spoke in a voice not entirely his own. "He chooses only those who are forgotten, and you are already fading." She ran. Up the stairs, through the corridors, past paintings that seemed to follow her with their hollow eyes. Every shadow looked deeper. Every hallway seemed longer. She finally made it back to the main hall, gasping for air, her skin drenched in cold sweat. But something had changed. The house wasn't the same. The walls had moved. Staircases reversed. Mirrors appeared where windows had once been. Time itself seemed to slip sideways. She opened a door expecting a closet. Instead, she found herself staring into a room that should not exist. A girl's bedroom. Tiny, neat, stuffed animals. A painting of a little girl and her sister. Maisie, her heart shattered. The bed was unmade, and the mirror on the wall had been shattered from the inside. The words on the wall were scrawled with chalk. "I miss you, Ellie. He's not our father. He's not even human." Suddenly, the door slammed shut behind her. The lamp flickered. Darkness swallowed the room. And in the pitch black, footsteps. Tiny, barefoot, dragging something. Then, a voice, low, guttural. One sister to open the gate, one sister to close it. Eleanor screamed, pounding the door. But the room had no door anymore. Only walls. And mirrors. In the reflection, she didn't see herself. She saw Maisie, mouth sewn shut, eyes bleeding, clawing at the glass. She saw Finch, skin peeling away like bark. She saw Lord Crawley standing behind her. Except it wasn't him. It was something older, taller, wearing his skin like a coat. And then finally she saw herself, in a cage, in the cellar, mouth open in an eternal scream. Suddenly the mirrors shattered inward, as if sucked into the void. She fell through. Darkness swallowed her. She awoke in her bed. The candle was lit. Everything looked untouched. As if nothing had happened. But her clothes were soaked. Her hands were scratched. Her foot still bore a bruise from when she'd kicked the door. And on the pillow beside her, a torn piece of fabric. It was from Maisie's jacket. They don't haunt the house. The house haunts them. She didn't remember falling asleep. Yet she awoke with blood on her hands. Eleanor stared at the dried crimson crusted beneath her fingernails, her mind spinning. The sun had not risen. The clock on the wall, if it still worked, claimed it was 3:33 a.m. The witching hour. Her window, which she swore she had bolted shut, now stood wide open. Cold air flooded the room. The floor was littered with feathers. Small white, some clean, some dripping. A dead bird lay on the sill, its beak forced open as though it had screamed. Written across the wall in blood. Only the painting remembers. She backed away. The message vanished before her eyes. Eleanor wandered the halls again, clutching a heavy candlestick like a weapon. The manor had changed shape. She was certain of it now. Corridors she'd never seen before appeared in familiar places. Doors she had passed hundreds of times now led somewhere else entirely. And always, something followed. A soft shuffle, a breath against her neck, a faint giggle. But whenever she turned, a nothing. Until she found the door. It was tall, carved with vines and sealed with wax. The symbol of Ashgrave burned into the center, a weeping eye wrapped in thorny roots. She pressed her hand to it. It opened, on its own. The room was massive. Dozens of massive portraits lined the walls, stretching up into the shadows above. Each painting was of a girl, no older than 13. Some wore dresses from the Victorian era, others from the 1970s, 80s, and even one that looked eerily like a girl Eleanor had once known in primary school. Every face was pale, every gaze dead. But one portrait was covered with a thick black sheet. The air around it was warmer, as if the house was protecting it. Eleanor reached out and pulled it down. Her heart dropped. It was Maisie, painted in exact detail, wearing the jacket she'd gone missing in. Her eyes looked alive, terrified. And the signature below? CW 2023. CDU, Crawley Wilton. He hadn't aged in 40 years because he hadn't needed to. The house had fed on them, one by one, preserving them in paint. The door slammed shut. A cold wind circled the room. The candles blew out, and the portraits began to weep. Thick black tears ran down their faces, streaking across the canvases. Some of the girls began to move. Slowly, their eyes followed Eleanor. And then came the whisper, hundreds of voices, all layered together. We remember. We wait. We rot, until the new one takes her place. She tried the door, locked. Tried the windows, unbricked shut. Then the paintings began to melt. Not into oil or color, but into flesh, screaming faces pressing through the canvas, eyes bulging, mouths opening and closing, begging for mercy or release. One hand ripped through the frame, grabbing Eleanor's wrist. You're her! You're the door! She screamed and wrenched free, falling backwards onto the cold floor. The portraits began to hum, a low, monstrous vibration, almost like chanting. In the corner, a figure appeared. Tall, slender, wearing a black smock soaked in paint and blood. Crawley, but not as she had seen him before. His face was split, half human, half stretched canvas. One eye dripped ink. The other glowed like burning coal, and in his hand, a brush made of human bone. He dipped it into a jar of red, not paint, blood, and whispered, "Let me finish the last one." He approached Eleanor slowly, brush raised, grinning. She ran, slamming into one of the melting portraits, pushing through it like a wet curtain. She fell into a new hallway, one she hadn't seen before. The walls were covered in photos, snapshots of every girl that had ever disappeared from Willowmore. Some were school photos, some Polaroids, and one, taken just hours ago, her. She was sleeping in bed, a pale face watching her from the shadows. The photo was still wet. Then she heard it, Maisie's voice, distant, crying. "Ellie, please, it hurts." Eleanor sprinted through the hall, calling her sister's name, tears blurring her vision. The photos on the walls burned as she passed. She reached a black door, heart hammering. Maisie was behind it. She could feel it. She pushed it open. A small room, a nursery, no light. Just a rocking chair, and in it, a child-sized figure. Head bowed, whimpering. "Maisie?" Eleanor stepped forward. The figure looked up, but it wasn't Maisie. It was another girl. Hollow eyes, mouth sewn shut. She reached up with trembling hands and handed Eleanor a key, carved into its metal. "Below the roots." Then the girl vanished, turning to dust in the chair. The rocking continued, but no one was there anymore. Eleanor stood alone in the dark, and the house laughed, a low, guttural chuckle rolling through the walls, as if the house itself had lungs. It had shown her something, but it wasn't done yet, not even close. He who walks beneath the house walks outside time. The key burned in her hand. Eleanor hadn't slept since the nursery. Her skin was pale, her eyes sunken. Every mirror she passed now showed a version of herself that was older, thinner, hollowed out by dread. But she couldn't stop. The key had chosen her. She returned to the east corridor, where the red thread had first appeared. and stood before the narrow door she hadn't dared open until now. Its wood pulsed faintly, like it was breathing. She slid the iron key into the lock. The door opened on its own, groaning like it hadn't been touched in centuries. A gust of air hit her face, wet, foul, like rotting wood and ancient soil. She descended. The staircase was endless. Narrow stone steps spiraled downward far beyond the bounds of the manor's foundation. It was colder with every step, and the silence was so dense that she could hear her own blood moving. Then came the whispers. Not from behind, from within the walls. Turn back. He waits. Your name is already carved. She continued anyway, until the stairway ended in an arch of tree roots, twisting and alive, framing a black doorway carved into rock. Above the arch was a single word. Feed. She entered. The space beyond wasn't a cellar. It was something older. It looked like a forgotten chapel, carved into the earth itself, with a ceiling lost in darkness and columns made of bone. Roots slithered across the ground like veins, pulsing with an amber glow. At the center stood a stone altar, cracked and soaked in dried blood. On its surface, dozens of small objects. A girl's hairbrush, a broken doll, a school badge, a baby tooth, a photograph of Maisie, and beside the altar, a mirror, tall, cracked, veiled with cobwebs. She moved toward it. The mirror showed Ashgrave, but twisted. The rooms were wrong. The walls bled. The furniture crawled with vines. And everywhere, children screamed from behind the glass. Suddenly, Eleanor's reflection smiled. But she hadn't. The reflection leaned forward and whispered, They put us in the walls, but I remembered the way out. And then it pointed behind her. Eleanor turned and found a wall she hadn't seen before. A mural stretched across it, painted in ancient, chipping reds. It depicted a ritual, a man wearing a crown of roots, a line of girls bound in chains, a great black tree, its roots feeding on blood, and at the base of the mural, scratched violently into the stone, one sister to open, one to close. The door is already bleeding. Suddenly footsteps. She turned fast, raising her lamp, but it went out. In the dark, someone began to sing. A lullaby, old broken. Down comes the night. The roots will crawl. Hide little hearts in the dining hall. Teeth in the bread, bones in the stew. Ashgrave will always remember you. A figure emerged from the dark. It wasn't Crawley. It was a girl, no more than 11. Her skin gray, her eyes glassy, mouth stitched shut with wire. She held out a notebook. Eleanor took it, hands shaking. Inside were pages upon pages of hand-drawn maps of the manor, and diary entries written in a shaky child's hand. I saw Mr. Finch feed the house again. He took Lucy. She screamed. But the walls liked it. They pulsed after. I think they like fear. I tried to run, got to the painting room, but Crawley's not a man. He's Roots wearing a suit. Maisie is still alive. I heard her last night, but not for long. He's going to finish the painting. Eleanor's breath hitched. She turned the last page. It was a drawing of herself, bound, eyes closed, being painted by Crawley. Beneath it, she is the last. Then the door stays open forever. Suddenly, screams, hundreds, echoing through the tunnel. Girls, crying, laughing, singing lullabies with no mouths. Eleanor ran. The ground cracked behind her. Roots reached from the walls, trying to grasp her ankles. Shadows moved, not like ghosts, but like memories hungry to exist again. She found another door, a hatch in the ground, iron, with a handprint burned into it. The diary girl stood beside it now, silent, pointing down. Eleanor lifted it and was swallowed by darkness. She landed in water, freezing, thick, almost gelatinous. She stood and realized the chamber was a cistern filled with bodies. Hundreds of preserved girls, suspended in fluid, eyes open, mouths bubbling. She screamed, trying to climb out, when a voice boomed through the stone. Ashgrave has fed for centuries. Crawley's voice, but deeper, elemental. You cannot run. You cannot win. You were chosen from the moment you were born. He stepped out from the wall itself, a man-shaped thing of roots, flesh, and oil. His mouth opened sideways. Inside, dozens of twitching hands. Eleanor scrambled from the pit, slipping, choking on fear. The diary girl grabbed her arm and dragged her into a tunnel lit by glowing mushrooms, and at the end, a door. Simple, wooden, with a small carving. Maisie. Eleanor touched it. It flew open. Inside was a room made of mirrors, infinite reflections, all showing different versions of Eleanor. In one, she was already dead. In another, she painted on the walls. In one, she wore Crawley's crown. But only one reflection showed something different. Maisie, tied to a chair, gagged, alive, and behind her, Crawley, brush in hand, painting her final breath. They are not waiting for you. They are waiting for the end. Eleanor could feel the weight of her own breath. It was getting harder to breathe. The mirrors twisted as she stared at Maisie, bound to the chair in the reflection. The eerie light of the underground cistern filtered through the cracks in the walls, casting long, shivering shadows that seemed to pulse with the rhythm of her racing heart. Maisie's eyes were wide, pleading, but no sound came from her lips. The reflection wasn't just a mirror anymore. It had become a gateway. She reached out. Her fingers brushed the surface, and a cold shock shot through her veins. The room sucked her in. For a moment, everything was still, frozen. And then, Eleanor stepped forward into darkness. Her feet hit soft soil, and she stumbled. But the ground beneath her feet was solid enough to hold her. The world around her had shifted. The mirrors were gone. In their place, vast, hollow trees, their gnarled branches hanging like withered arms, reaching down toward her. The air stank of rot and earth, and the smell was thick, suffocating. Eleanor's pulse quickened. She spun around, but the room was gone. The door had vanished. The walls, the ceiling, the mirrors, everything had disappeared into an endless forest of twisted roots and shadows. She could hear a sound, a faint humming, low, growing, as though the earth itself was vibrating in response to something alive beneath. And then she heard it. A voice. You were never meant to leave. It was Crawley. His voice was everywhere, emanating from the trees, from the ground, from the very air. Eleanor's breath caught in her throat. She glanced around wildly, but couldn't locate him. She heard him again, closer this time. His laugh was cold, like shattered glass. The door is always open for you, Eleanor, but you, like them, must choose your path. He was near. A shadow flashed by, quick and fleeting, but enough for Eleanor to catch a glimpse of his slender figure. He was taller now, impossibly tall, bending under the weight of the roots that wrapped around him like chains. His face flickered between human and something else, a monstrous mask of splintering wood and rotting flesh. Eleanor began to run. She ran without thinking, her legs moving of their own accord as the trees whispered and moaned behind her. You can't escape. You are part of this place now. Her shoes slipped on the damp ground. Roots tangled around her ankles, pulling her down. But she didn't stop. She couldn't stop. She had to find Maisie. The humming grew louder. And then the screams. Hundreds of voices echoing in perfect harmony, each one distorted, each one disturbed. Eleanor's head spun. The trees seemed to close in on her. The ground trembled beneath her, and her feet slid in the slick muck. She pushed forward, gasping for air. And then she stopped. Before her stood the altar. The same one from the underground room, now massive. Roots had exploded outward from its stone surface, reaching up toward the sky, as if trying to escape the earth itself. And there, bound to the altar, was Maisie. But she was different. Her eyes were wide and unblinking, but they were no longer hers. They were empty, hollow, black pits. Her skin was stretched too tight, as though the life had been drained out of her. Eleanor took a step forward. But as she did, she realized something. The altar was alive. The stone was breathing. It exhaled a thick, putrid mist that curled around Eleanor, seeping into her lungs. The altar wasn't just stone, it was flesh, and roots, twisting, writhing, alive. Maisie was part of it. And then, from the darkness, Crawley's figure appeared, larger than before. His face was split, his eyes burning with a dark glow, like two black flames consuming the night. You've been running for so long, Eleanor. But you cannot run from the truth. Eleanor tried to speak. Her throat closed, the words stuck. She could feel her heart pounding in her chest, the blood rushing to her ears. Maisie is already gone. She was the last. But you still have a choice. The air around them shimmered. Eleanor could feel the roots growing inside her, under her skin, through her bones. Crawley was speaking, but his voice wasn't human anymore. It was distorted, twisted, the sound of roots tearing through flesh. You can join her, become one with the house, become eternal as they did. Or, he didn't finish the sentence. The ground beneath her feet buckled. Roots tore free, reaching for her legs, her arms, her throat. They twisted, coiling tightly around her, pulling her toward the altar. Maisie's eyes never blinked. They didn't move at all. Her mouth was still sewn shut, but Eleanor could hear her screaming inside her head. "No, Ellie, please, don't let it take you." Eleanor struggled, but it was no use. The roots pulled tighter. They were alive, feeding off her fear, off her resistance. The house is hungry, and it is always hungry for more. Then a sharp pain shot through Eleanor's chest. She looked down. The roots had pierced her heart. The pain was unimaginable. But what was worse, the roots were growing inside her, taking over. Her mind screamed in agony, but her body betrayed her. The altar's whispering grew louder. The air was thick with suffocating energy, like the house itself was alive and breathing in time with her. Suddenly something changed. Eleanor's body convulsed, and for a moment, she felt like she was drowning in the very ground beneath her. But then, she found herself floating, up, away from the roots, away from the altar. And Maisie, no longer trapped, no longer bound, and was floating with her. Her body was different. Her eyes were still empty, but now she was smiling. Her smile stretched too wide, too unnatural. The house was alive. It had been alive all along, and it wasn't letting them go. There is no escape. There never was. Eleanor felt everything slipping away. Her body was no longer hers. She wasn't floating anymore. She was being pulled, dragged into the deep recesses of Ashgrave Manor, through the earth itself, through the roots that now controlled her. Her body was a puppet, the house's puppet, and her mind was slowly drowning in the ancient whispers of an evil much older than herself. She tried to scream, but the sound was trapped in her throat, like the roots had choked the very air from her lungs. The dark sky above her spun in endless circles, and all she could hear was the faint laughter of Crawley, the ever-present voice of the thing that had been waiting for her. "Welcome home, Eleanor." Maisie's face flashed before her, a twisted reflection of what was. Her friend's empty eyes staring back at her, no longer human. She could feel Maisie's presence, not in the way she had once known her, but as a hollow vessel, a thing that existed only to feed Ashgrave. "Please, Ellie, it's over. There's no way out. You have to accept it." The roots gripped tighter, and Eleanor felt a crack in her chest. It wasn't just her heart that was breaking. It was the very essence of who she was. Her body was a vessel now, a conduit for the cursed land beneath the house. The ground, it wanted her. It wanted Maisie. It had already taken so many, and now it demanded her soul. The memories of her family, her friends, her old life, they slipped away, fading like smoke in the wind. All that remained were the whispers, the laughter, the hollow roots, and the distant hum of the altar where Maisie once had been. "Join us, Eleanor. We will live forever." Crawley's figure was there again. But now he was more than just a man. He was a mass of twisting roots and gnashing teeth, his body a horrible mixture of human and tree, shifting with every breath, growing stronger with every passing moment. His eyes glowed, twin black flames that were not of this world. "There is no end to the house. There is no escape from Ashgrave. But you will be eternal." His voice wasn't human anymore. It was the voice of the land, the earth, the roots, and everything that had come before her. Eleanor fell to her knees, overwhelmed by the suffocating weight of it all. Maisie's empty smile never faded. She was frozen, trapped in the same twisted existence as all the others before her. An unwilling puppet in the house's never-ending play. The house feeds on what you were. It will live off you forever. Eleanor closed her eyes. She was too weak to fight, too broken, and as the roots tore through her, twisting her limbs, pulling her deeper into the earth, she knew that she was not the first to fall. She wouldn't be the last. Maisie's face flashed once more before her. But now it was not the face of a child. Now it was worn, old, and behind her, standing in the shadows of Ashgrave Manor, were all the others. The girls, the lost souls, hundreds of them. Their bodies were frozen, their eyes wide, their mouths sewn shut. They stood as one with the walls, with the roots, with the land itself. The air grew colder, the silence grew louder. Then a strange stillness fell. Eleanor opened her eyes. The altar was gone. The roots receded, leaving only the damp, empty soil beneath her feet. The whispers faded. But the thing that had been Crawley remained. He stood over her now, watching. He was no longer the man she had seen in the manor. No longer the twisted figure of Roots. He had become the heart of the house itself, its final form, and the embodiment of every curse that had ever been placed on the land. "It is done," he whispered, his voice like the creak of old wood. The ground beneath Eleanor's feet shifted again, and the house began to tremble, as though it were awakening. "You were always meant to be here, always meant to become part of it, to feed it, to become part of the endless cycle." And then the truth hit her. It wasn't just about her. It had never been about her. It had always been about the house. The rooted kingdom beneath Ashgrave Manor was not just a cursed land. It was a prison, an eternal hell. A place where the land consumed the living, fed on their fears, their pain, their blood. And now Eleanor was part of it. She could feel the roots inside her, growing. The house's pulse was her own. The trees and soil were alive, moving through her veins. The transformation had begun. But before she could scream, before she could beg for mercy, the last door to the manor opened. It wasn't a physical door. It wasn't a door at all. It was the end. The house rippled, like a memory being erased. The lights in Ashgrave Manor flickered, and the walls seemed to melt away. Everything that had once been part of this cursed place began to collapse, folding inward. But this time it wasn't just the manor collapsing. It was the world. The house's hunger was never ending, and now it had begun to consume reality itself. The end had come, and as Eleanor's body was swallowed whole by the earth, she realized the horrible truth. She was not the last. She had become the house. The silence of Willow Moor had claimed another. The end